All right, welcome everybody to the workshop today. We're going to be talking about exit and build strategy. We are here at Solarpunk 2021, the second Solarpunk Summit in Central Texas. I like to say Central Texas because I'm not a big fan of Austin anymore. Well, it's my hometown, but I prefer the surrounding area and the people that are here, right? But today we are going to be talking about exit and build strategy. So what does that mean? There are a lot of different paths and means to achieve a better world. And a better world means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. For me, one of the biggest values that I want for the world that I live in and the world that my children are going to grow up in and the future generations, my good friend Derek Brose talks about this native wisdom, this indigenous wisdom where they think about the 7 generations to come and how our actions today will impact 7 generations, which I think it really takes things on a big level, right? And so a big value for me is freedom. Freedom, bodily autonomy, choice. I believe that if we were to have more freedom in our personal lives and on a societal level, then it would really solve a lot of the problems that we're facing as human beings. Now, of course, there would still be struggle, there would still be problems, but I strongly believe that the institution of government and other centralized institutions are in large part responsible for many of the struggles that people face all across the world. So when I talk about exiting and building, what I really care about is exiting coercive institutions. By coercive, I mean entities, businesses, corporations, militant groups, governments that force people to do things against their will, right? So you have direct violence, which is just a direct act of aggression, but then you also have coercion, which is threatening to aggress upon someone and trying to get them to do something that they wouldn't have done absent that threat of violence. That's of course what taxation is, that's what mandates are, that's what all sorts of controls and regulations are. And oftentimes, I'm like an anarchist libertarian. You'll probably be able to pick that up by my talk, but a lot of people think regulations are great and they protect the environment, but in reality, and there's all these financial regulations. In reality, most of it's what's called protectionism, which is larger businesses, big mega corporations. They actually prefer the regulations because they don't follow them. And when they get in trouble, they get like a slap on the wrist for spilling gallons of oil into the ocean. And it really just helps to weed out competition. But I'm gonna throw that out there. So when I talk about exit and build, I want to exit coercive and centralized institutions. And I want to build voluntary and decentralized institutions. That's what I'm all about. But I want to share this workshop in the context of everyone's personal values and principles, exiting that in our lives which doesn't align with our values. Again, one of my highest values is freedom. Maybe you guys have different values in your lives. Exiting those institutions, those actions that we engage in, those behaviors, those habits, and building ones that are more in alignment with our principles and our values, whatever they may be. So we are going to talk a little bit about some big picture stuff and how when we change the behavior in our lives and when we encourage other people to do so and when we live our best lives, it kind of radiates outwards. And then when more people do that, we'll see that we can bring about mass societal change, right? And then I want to talk about more on a micro level. I want us to together take an assessment on where we are in different areas of our lives, whether it's financial, business, how we earn a living, the food that we eat, where we get our food, our health practices, how we relate to one another, our dwelling, and the community that we live in. So I want us to together take stock, perform a self-assessment, and determine which areas of our lives we're in alignment with, and we should be happy and excited and proud of ourselves, and which areas are out of alignment, but because of convenience, because of coercion, because of whatever, we find ourselves living a life that isn't entirely in alignment with our values. And so what I want to help to do is help to nudge people or shove, peacefully shove, and encourage everyone to get more in alignment with our values. because I have a feeling this crowd values freedom just as much as I do, I imagine. Okay, so we find ourselves in some really, really crazy times, right? I've been an activist for almost 20 years now, and in that time, you know, I've become very familiar, been in jail twice for protesting, but become very aware of the fact that there's a lot of tyranny in this world. There's a massive police state that unfortunately likes to target marginalized communities. There's a drug war that criminalizes plants and medicines, and I think all drugs should be legal. In fact, I'm an anarchist. So I don't think we should have a government at all. I think we can all self-organize and self-govern and figure out peaceful, harmonious relationships with one another. But I always think, when I think about the drug war, I think of this Ron Paul quote where they're like trying to get Ron Paul. He ran for president twice. Really cool guy. And they were trying to get him at this debate. And they're like, well, Mr. Paul, isn't it true that you want to have all drugs legalized? You would like to see heroin legalized? And he's like, yeah, I mean, everyone thinks if we were to legalize heroin, would you start doing it all of a sudden? You know, nothing would really change, except maybe it'd be safer. Right? So we have the drug war. We have all these terrible, terrible wars, right? There's a war that's been going on. I guess it just ended, kind of, I don't know. It ended in total chaos in Afghanistan. And now there's this militant regime that's like terrible to women and all sorts of stuff that's still in power. Something was up there. I think it was like a purposeful kind of exit. I don't know. But that went on almost my entire adult life, you know. And then if you pay income tax, you're indirectly subsidizing that war and all this terrible stuff that the federal government does, right? That's not cool. There's just all sorts of problems. The governments want to control people's bodies, whether it's what a woman can do or a mother can do with her body, or whether it's what health choices we make in relation to a pandemic, or some call it a plandemic. So some controversy out there. Usually pretty loud and proud of how I feel about things. Regardless of what you think about COVID or how it's affected you or people around you, one thing that I would hope we could all agree on is that we should all have autonomy over our bodies, 100%, consistently applied all the way across the board, right? So yeah, there's all this traditional tyranny taking place. And now we're entering this new age of technocracy. Does anybody know what technocracy is? So technocracy, for those not aware, it's essentially a type of government. It's not ruled by politicians, which is a terrible way to organize society. Also, it's ruled by experts and scientists and technocrats, right? And that's what this really powerful group called the World Economic Forum. It's some of the wealthiest people in the world. I have no problem with wealthy people, but I have a problem with wealthy people that want to control others and exploit people and exploit resources. And so this group, they want to bring about what they're calling the Great Reset, right? It's essentially this marketing plan. They say that they care about sustainability and they care about equality and equity, but in reality, it's pretty clear that they want to control people in a pretty diabolical way. So there's always been this effort to create more centralization. In fact, there's been secretive efforts, although it's more like an open conspiracy, to create a global government that's totalitarian in nature, right? And what these big oligarchs are aiming to do, the Rockefeller Foundation is a big part of it, as is the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They want to create like a panopticon society where there's mass surveillance all over the place. There's this concept of a smart city that's coming about, right? And it sounds great. It's like, oh yeah, we'll track the carbon output and we'll make sure that everybody's taken care of and safe. But in reality, what it's going to end up being is like 5G, interconnectivity, Internet of Things, track, trace, surveil, microphones, cameras, geothermal scanners in the street lamps, and all sorts of crazy stuff. And unfortunately, what this is all going towards is like a Chinese communist-style social credit score system. That's being exported all around the world right now. I know some people are like, oh, that sounds kind of weird, and like you've been listening to Alex Jones or something like that? No, this is all like documented. And when I said it was an open conspiracy, it's these people, these groups like brag about it and they're super excited about it. So I share this because I think that we should all feel really grateful that we're alive at this time and that we're participating in a beautiful community like this that aims to really subvert the dominant paradigm and bring about a cataclysmic shift in the way that we relate to one another, and the way that we relate to the earth and to nature, and really bring about some major changes. So I just want to kind of share that to kind of maybe fuel a little motivation for like a big picture change. And again, there's all this big picture change. It's like, how are we going to change, and how are we going to go up against all these powerful forces that have been in positions of power for so long? And really, I think the best thing that we can do is focus internally and try to figure out, okay, well, how are we in alignment with some of those things that we oppose, right? And it's a struggle. So one thing that I had a realization with, because it would be my preference to not pay any taxes at all, to not have a driver's license even, to pay this stinking registration and all this control stuff. In fact, I used to do that. And but then I got like 5 tickets in 1 year. And they're like, if you get another ticket, we're suspending your driver's license for 3 years or something. I was like, oh shit. And I had kids by then too. I was like, I don't want to get stressed out and bitch at the cops while my kids are in the car. So things kind of changed. But I had this realization that like, we all have different values, and it's not just black and white, right? Like freedom is an extremely high value of mine, but also is comfort and security, and having access to resources and money so I can have choices and do things that I want in life. And so is my kids, right? And so as we go forward with this workshop, I just want everybody to try and be conscious of the different values that they have, and how sometimes these values can compete with one another, right? Like a great example, I'm getting a hard time with all my crew that's like really against this technocracy thing. My fiance and I just bought a Tesla. That's really cool. That's really fast and fun to drive, right? And it's sustainable too. Well, most people are like, you know that you're just charging it using coal power or something. But we just got solar panels installed, so that's not going to be the case here shortly. But they're all giving me a hard time because they think Elon Musk is a technocrat and the car can be tracked and surveilled and stuff. I'm like, well, I'm sure you have a smartphone. That's just as tracked and surveilled. But for me, you know, one of my values is to have a fun car that makes me feel alive and that makes me feel like accomplished. Like, wow, we're able to get this really cool car. And plus it like lights my kids on fire when we drive it. It's super cool. So I have like freedom and privacy over here. I also have, you know, I want to step on the gas and accelerate 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. That's kind of a value of mine too, you know? And at the same time, like I file my 1040. And even though I'm conscious that some of that money is going to fund pieces of bombs that get dropped on innocent people, right? I still value my own stability and security, and I have a business, and I want my business to be successful, and I accept credit cards, and I have a bank, right? So it's like, the idea is that ideally we can exit entirely. And what that looks like is like my good friend Derek Rose, I'm wearing his shirt right now. You are beautiful, you're powerful, you're free. It's a mantra that he always does. It's really great and powerful, but he's 100% agorist, which means he's completely outside the system. He doesn't pay taxes. He doesn't even have a bank account. In fact, the first time I ever made a Bitcoin transaction back in like 2013 or so was to him. He was writing articles for this news source that I did. And he's like, well, I don't have a checking account and I don't accept credit cards or anything. And he was in Houston, I was in Austin. So I was going to the local grocery store and doing Western Union. It was like 7% fee. I had to wait in line at the customer service counter. And I was like, why don't I just send a Bitcoin? Wow. So we set up Bitcoin wallet, really cool. But either way, he's 100% outside the system, right? Which is great, but it's not for everybody. Some people have a mortgage. Some people have children. Some people have their kids in a government school, right? So the revelation that I had is, yes, it's ideal to exit and then build, but what if we start building the institutions now so that we may exit together, right? And we can have 1 foot on the inside. I call it the inside-outside strategy. We got 1 foot on the inside, paying taxes, bank account. We got 1 foot on the outside, secret crypto stash, right? So that's kind of thing. So I just want to kind of throw that context there to kind of position things. Like, we're going to talk a lot about a lot of stuff, and if you're anything like me, you're not 100% in alignment with what your values are. But that's okay. Let's not be hard on ourselves. Let's just come up with a plan and strategy so that one day, perhaps, let's manifest it. One day, we're all going to be living in our own personal lives and collectively in a society, in an environment that is totally free, totally peaceful, totally sustainable. The oligarchs have no control over us. Donald Trump or Joe Biden have nothing to do with our day-to-day lives, and we're all living in total bliss, doing ecstatic dance by the river, right? You know, in many ways, like, that's what this weekend's like, right? No one's worrying about their accounting, or we're not driving on a road in our internal combustion engine car, or whatever. We're all pretty free. So I want this to be a permanent state for us. Every time I go to a festival or like a big outdoor fun thing, it's like, why can't we just live like this all the time? Well, I got news for you. We can't. It just takes a lot of work, some time, and some commitment. All right, so we're going to focus on a few different areas, and we're going to go around and share, and we'll try to go for some of the folks in the comments there as well. But we're going to lay out some different areas, and then we're going to talk about how we're in alignment, how we're not in alignment, and what we can do, what steps and strategies we can take in order to get in alignment. So the first area that I'd like to cover is finances and income, right? So a simple test for this is, like, if you have a checking account or you have a checkbook, and if it says like Chase Manhattan Bank at the top, or maybe HSBC or Wells Fargo or whatever, these big mega banks, they're not the most ethical institutions. I remember recently, like, Wells Fargo was like taking money from people's checking accounts. Anybody remember that? HSBC was laundering money for the drug cartels in Mexico. Like, so is there anyone that has one of these big bank accounts with like one of the big banks, right? So one simple step that you can do is pull your money out of a big central bank, well, not a central bank, but a big mega bank, and open up with a local credit union, right? Does anybody have? You just did that?
Yeah.
Are you here locally?
Yesterday.
Sweet. Oh, yesterday. All right.
No,
Right.
day before yesterday.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the credit union?
Navy Army.
Navy Army?
Yeah, I looked at all the credit unions where I live, and that's the best one.
Okay, cool.
But I would like to do better than that.
Sure. Well,
so it's a first step.
that's right. It's all about baby steps too. Like, and then you start building momentum when you have these little wins, and you're feeling like, oh wow, I don't have the bank anymore. Got the credit union, feels pretty good. What's next, right? So, does anybody else have a credit union? What do you got?
Navy Federal.
Navy Federal. A lot of Navy Federal. You guys are members. Yes. What about you?
Yes. RBFC.
Okay, that's a good one. Yep. Becca, is that the one that does loans for properties and stuff? Yeah, they're good. Yeah.
They'll do like
We have so one of my businesses, I sell kratom and CBD. Oh, go ahead. What do you got?
Oh, I have neighborhood credit union.
Now that sounds warm.
I'm struggling to find one for my business because they don't do business accounts, actual business.
Oh, really?
So it's hard for me to find one in Dallas. What? A plus.
A+ Federal Credit Union. That's what we have for our joint account. I had a bank account with Frost Bank, which I thought was like, oh, it's a state bank. It's not even federally chartered. This is great. But because I sold CBD and kratom, they gave me the boot. They called me one day and they're like, well, you know, we're not going to be able to service you anymore. I was like, what the hell? It's everything I sell is completely legal in Texas. So I found another bank. It's not a credit union, but it's a bank. But they happily accepted me, knowing that I sell kratom and CBD. It's called Horizon Bank. So that was one thing where I thought I had like a smaller bank, not the big boys, but I shifted. They're all connected in many ways, which brings me to the next thing that we can do to bring even more alignment. When I was on the phone with the Wells Fargo branch manager, I was like, you know, one of the reasons why I've been into cryptocurrency for many years now is because there's no branch manager at the downtown office that can call you and shut your bank account down. No one can control cryptocurrency. It's completely decentralized. So how many people have a cryptocurrency wallet? All right, people. If you don't have one, I'd be happy to help you set one up while we're here. We got great internet service. You can download it easily. Or if you don't want to, this weekend, I put together a free mini course. The website is setupacryptowallet.com. I thought that was a great URL. Setupacryptowallet.com, and I take you through step-by-step how to set up a multi-wallet. So you can do Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, all that stuff. So as you can see, we started off with like Chase Manhattan, centralized banks, the bad guys. But a great step is to move to a credit union. So you can still have access to banking, right? Because we're inside outside. Right? I prefer not to use credit cards or debit cards at all, but unfortunately not everyone is there with the cryptocurrency thing. So it's like an inside outside. And then the next step we can take is cryptocurrency. Yes.
I actually paid for a course on cryptocurrency from the beginning to end. If anybody wants access to this information, just come find me. And it's like a full thing of like explaining everything in detail of like what it is.
Sweet.
And I'd love to offer this for whoever wants to learn. Yeah, so I paid for this course already, so you just need to log in. And then,
What's it called?
the course, it's called DeFi Finance, so decentralized finance.
Cool.
By this guy Chris K.
What is in John's course? I was thinking that too. Yeah.
That's not what mine's called, but
This guy Chris K.
cool. Excellent. Yeah, it's a great world, and there's a lot of opportunity with cryptocurrency. But still, some people like to go another step and create barter networks. Does anybody belong to like a free group or like the local neighborhood thing where people just share things with each other? Yeah, what's that called?
So Austin has a lot of buy nothing groups.
Yeah, buy nothing.
Yeah.
Huh?
So Austin buy nothing. We actually have to split our
Buy
neighborhoods
nothing.
with smaller neighborhoods.
Oh, cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great because it's like a sharing economy. There's no financial transaction whatsoever. And it's good for the environment because a lot of times people will throw stuff away, but other people, one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? I'm a big fan of barter too, right? Barter's a challenge because that's how money actually was invented. It used to be all barter, but then people are like, well, I don't really need a spear. You don't want my cow? No, I don't need a cow. So that's how money came about. It's like, what if we have this medium of exchange? But barter's still great, especially on a micro level with people that you know that have goods and services. And one of the great reasons why it's amazing is because the government expects you to pay tax on barter stuff. I don't know if anybody knew that. You probably didn't, which is great because nobody does. We're all rebels, right? So it's really easy to engage in commerce with one another and trade and have it be outside the system. Because again, I think we need to move away from all that stuff because we're essentially subsidizing our own oppression and the oppression of other people in foreign countries. It's not cool. So the more things we can do to opt out of that, because again, you go to a big bank, a credit union, that's still inside the system so much that the government can backdoor and garnish your wages or see whatever the heck you're doing, doesn't align with your 1040 or whatever, right? But then you go to cryptocurrency and it's like, what are you going to do? And you go to barter or sharing economy and it's total freedom, one-on-one connection. You don't even need a phone or an app or anything or a blockchain, right? So there's all sorts of different options. Now, another thing is like finance, like investments, right? So something that would be out of alignment if you share a lot of the values that we do would be like investing in a big pharmaceutical company and having stocks or having a mutual fund or some sort of fund that has money in pharmaceuticals or the military industrial complex, right? So anybody has that in their portfolio or anything, you know, what's that? Yeah, don't raise your hands, but you know, you can consider investing in something else like all the green economy and stuff. There's still plenty of opportunity to make money if that's what your goal is, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm very money hungry. I like money, I like crypto, right? That's the thing about money. Like a lot of people have a negative relationship with money. I was overhearing a talk about sales and closing and stuff. I was like, I like this message that's going on here. You know, people are like, money's the root of all evil and money will corrupt you. And it's like, there's people that are just generally unhappy. And if they have money, they're still going to be unhappy. They're just going to have money, right? There's people that don't have a lot of money and are totally blissful and their life is serene, which is great, right? Money is just a tool. It can be used for good. A good person with more money can do more good in their lives. And I hope that they would, right? Just want to throw that out there. So, and then when it comes to investments, right? The whole cryptocurrency world has decentralized finance, which is really cool. We just got a new house. We closed on a 10-acre homestead a few months ago, which is super cool. We're building an intentional community there. And I used decentralized finance to pay for the house to get painted. So you take cryptocurrency, you supply it with a smart contract on Ethereum, right? So a smart contract is basically like, instead of having a contract on paper that's governed by the state of Texas, it's code. A contract is coded. Contract basically like, if A happens, then B and C will happen, right? So I took some cryptocurrency, I supplied it as collateral, and as I was able to give myself a loan. And then I took that loan and converted it to Federal Reserve notes to dollars, and I paid for the house to get painted. And I paid the loan back.
Either. If you take it out as a loan, it's not a taxable event.
That's right.
It's kind of like a loophole for you to just buy tax.
Uh-huh.
You have to pay yourself back.
Yeah, and you pay the loan back, then you get the crypto back. So there's all these new systems that are helping us to subsidize and finance. And we have plans to bring on investors put the money in crypto, or they invest in crypto, and then we put that in a contract, and then we use the money that we loan to pay for people to buy pieces of land and own their own land and buy their own homes. And we completely circumvent the banks altogether, which I think is super groovy. Okay, so that's about money and finance. Another thing is how we earn a living, our income, right? So there's many people that maybe have a job to get by, but they work for like a big corporation, or they work doing something that is begrudging for them, right? So if there's folks that have a line of work, a 9 to 5 or whatever, and every day they're, you know, going to work with their head down, and it takes away their life force, then I would encourage and challenge you to consider a different line of work, or keep that line of work for stability, but start a side hustle, and then slowly but surely start adding fuel to that side hustle fire before maybe one day you could take that over as part-time or full-time job, right? Is there anybody that has a job that doesn't light them on fire, or they're thinking about quitting, or everyone's like, fuck it, we do what we love all day. Yeah.
We're here on a Thursday.
That's right, Thursday. All right. Good crowd. Good crowd. Now we're talking. All right. So the next area that I want to share about is our internet game, how we communicate with one another. How many people have a Facebook account? How many people have Instagram? Twitter?
No,
No, I'm banned on Twitter.
You're banned on Twitter? All right.
For life.
That's right. For sharing the truth. So all of these platforms are being like cleansed, and any semblance of the truth, anything that goes against the grain, goes against the narrative, it's being censored, right? And so when a lot of people rely on these channels, it really interrupts communication and the sharing of ideas. We all are mature enough to be exposed to ideas that maybe are controversial, right? So how many people have an encrypted means of communication? Signal. Yep, Signal is, I believe, probably the best way to chat one-on-one with someone. It's a free app. You can download it. Telegram has one-on-one encryption as well, but not for the groups. I think on Signal you can do a group encrypted. So this is important as something to have, right? Because unfortunately, more and more people that just live like we do are becoming criminalized, or becoming tracked and surveilled, right? There's this push for conformity and for having people live this normal way of life. And it's good for us to have open channels of communication with one another in case there's emergencies, or if we want to hear news that isn't approved by CNN and Fox News, right? Or Zuckerberg. All that stuff's like goes back to the World Health Organization, CDC, with all the cleansing and scrubbing of the COVID-19 stuff and against the vaccine. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I think Telegram is a really great platform. There's a lot of really cool free thinkers. There's a lot of organizing that takes place. There's like, that's where Solarpunk, if nobody's in the Solarpunk Telegram group, there's a chat group for organizing and figuring stuff out and logistics and asking questions, or if you need help or whatever. So if you don't have Telegram, it's totally free, great platform. There's channels, which are kind of like a feed, you know, like a news feed or Facebook feed. And then there's groups where people can engage. If you're a content creator, you got some cool stuff going on, you can create your own channel and invite people to share. You can create your own channel this weekend and then share it in the Solarpunk group, and we'll all join it, do cool stuff. So I think that's really important. How many people have Gmail as their primary email account? I do too. I have a Gmail, but I also have Proton Mail. Does anybody use an encrypted email platform? Yep.
Something came out about Proton Mail last week or time. Yeah, it's not as great as it's pretended that they are.
There's a lot of stuff, especially in the crowd that I run with. They're like purists when it comes to all this stuff, and it's like, and there's all this stuff like, I heard Bill Gates bought Telegram, and then somebody just like shares a little meme. Bill Gates bought Telegram, and then they share it, and they're like, Bill Gates bought Telegram. It's like, oh, what's the source of that? This picture on someone shared. You never really know, but it's always like, okay, well, how pure can we go? You know, it's just, again, taking those steps, right? So I still use Google because I really like Drive, Google Drive and Docs and stuff. There's an alternative called CryptPad. The website is crypt, C-R-Y-P-T, pad, P-A-D.fr, I believe. And it has similar functionality where you can have a shared doc or a shared spreadsheet. But it's missing some features, like you can't do Control Z. There's no undo on the spreadsheet, and it's kind of like sometimes it crashes. That's why, like, again, I have a value to be successful in my entrepreneurial pursuits. And sometimes these other platforms, I want to be private, right? But sometimes they interfere with that value, and it's like, all right, where am I going to go? But I think, again, with the inside-outside game, if you have a Gmail account, try to set up another account, like C Templar is one that the purists really like, C Templar. Proton Mail is a good one too. And then maybe you just strike up some of your personal conversations or emails on these platforms, but you still have your business stuff or the newsletters you're subscribed to. Does anybody have any other encrypted means of communication that they want to shout out?
Session.
Session?
Is pretty good. It creates like this, it almost looks like a crypto wallet address for one conversation, so that's pretty good.
Session or session?
Session. Like
Session.
Session. Yeah.
I think that's one where you can host it on your own
Signal is
servers.
Like CIA bought out or whatever, infiltrated. I don't know. So
Whatever. Another thing too, like
on mail, you know, you never, anything is on internet. Anything that's goes out there connected to,
Yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
cloud, nothing is secure. Anything can be hacked ultimately, and yeah. So.
you know the best, most private, secure app. That's why these types of events are so great. That human connection, right? Yeah, I mentioned the World Economic Forum earlier in this world that they want to create, and a lot of it they want to move things into this metaverse, right? And there's folks that are doing metaverse style platforms, right? But it's metaverse for good and it's good intention. But these guys have a desire to like move people away from the real life world where most of our daily lives take place behind a computer. That's one of the reasons why the lockdowns and all this COVID stuff was so perfectly fit into these plans, almost as though it was intentional or purposeful or created in a lab or something and leaked on purpose to bring about this desired end. I don't know. It's weird. But they want to create that environment where we all work from behind our computer. It's a Zoom, it's a virtual office, it's a virtual conference. Anybody done like a virtual conference stuff? We do these hybrid events with all our stuff now, but there's platforms where it's like you're in a little avatar and you walk into the conference room and there's like little bulletin boards and stuff. And it's like, I get it, right? Like it's kind of a paradox because this technology, it allows us to connect with people globally and share ideas and innovate and do cool things, right? And still have relationships with folks from high school and if our family lives elsewhere. But it also kind of is causing us to lose touch with that human connection, which I think is so important. So again, it's like convenience over here, but back to nature and old way of doing things. It's like we need to make sure that we're striking a balance, right? And that's why I think events like this are so freaking cool. All right, shout out to the audience out there watching along. I'll try to follow some of the comments and
I have a question.
come to you guys. Yes.
Why do we really care so much about privacy, especially when it's being trusted by a huge organization like, say, Google as an example, but they're incentivized to not break our privacy financially, right?
Sure.
They come in and they use all our information, our email, nobody's going to have Gmail anymore.
Well, so we all have different values, right? So privacy is really important to some people. It's less important to some people. Like some of the people in my circle, it's super duper important. But for me, I'm a public figure. I speak all the time. But there's certain things I discuss, like my kinks, that I don't want to be public information. Sorry, I'm an open book here. But to answer your question, wait for the next workshop when the sun goes down. To answer your question though, these institutions like Google are very much leveraging our information for private benefit and for profit. And like Facebook, there's always something about a free platform. If it's a free platform that doesn't have a fee, then you're the commodity. You're what's being utilized, your information. And to take a step further, so I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, honestly, on Facebook, sometimes I like that the ads are tailored to what I'm into, right? Like, I asked my lovely lady to marry me, and then we're talking about wedding and stuff, and now all of a sudden, I'm getting all these wedding ads and stuff. I never click on them. I'm sure she does, but Yeah, and like I'm into business and entrepreneur and marketing and stuff, and I'm like, wow, look, I didn't know about, I wouldn't have known about this event if it wasn't for this stuff, you know. But then at the same time, to take it a step further, where all of this is going, it's not here now, but if we adopt a long view and if we try to study current events and study what's taking place in other areas to anticipate what is coming, we're very much coming towards a Chinese-style social credit score system in the US. Some of it's going to have to do with carbon output too. Right? I know this is a very sustainable and conscious environment about crowd about the environment and the earth, but a lot of this carbon cap and trade and like carbon economy, a lot of that stuff is in large part about control. I mean, you can kind of tell when someone's not serious when it's like, we're the US government, we want to eliminate carbon and we want to control carbon and do a cap and tax program. It's like, well, you guys are emitting a whole lot of carbon and dropping depleted uranium in the Middle East, and your oil tankers and your giant warships that are traveling all around the world, whatever. The point that I was going to make is like the surveillance and everything, pretty soon in the future, unless we opt out of it, there's going to be like a monthly carbon allotment that you're able to consume or produce. And if you get over your allotment, your social credit score could drop. Or there's already intellectuals and scientists that are calling for climate lockdowns, right? So I'm concerned about the environment, and I'm concerned about things changing and all sorts of chaos and more adverse weather events. But I don't think locking people in their homes is the solution for that. But some people do. And so I guess to get back to what your question is, there's this effort to collect, catalog, trace every single bit of information about human beings. One of the things that these World Economic Forum clowns want to do with this great reset is called the fourth industrial revolution, right? So we had previous industrial revolutions where it was like factories and then the information age, right? This fourth industrial revolution, they want to merge biology and technology. So for example, Microsoft is creating a planetary supercomputer where they want to track, trace, and catalog all the biodiversity on Earth. And again, they coax it as though we want to protect the environment and protect biodiversity. Meanwhile, Microsoft has weapons systems, right? Dropping bombs, again, back to that inconsistency. But it's all about tracking, tracing, and cataloging. So when I think about big tech and the information that they collect and the omniscience that they're designed, which means all-knowing, I very much reject that, right? And so some people say, well, I'm an open book, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's like, yeah, you're not doing anything wrong now. And the lifestyle that many of us enjoy in this community, with what degree, you know, it's outside of the norm. Some of these lifestyles are going to be controlled and regulated, and many of the ways that people live, it could be illegal someday, right? So I don't know if that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but, and again, we all have different values. Some people don't care if big tech is tracking and controlling their stuff. But I can tell you where this is going, and it's not going to be a pretty way of life. And I ultimately do think that all of this stuff that I spoke about, this scary, futuristic kind of stuff, I do believe it's going to come to fruition. But my hope is that we opt out and we build communities outside of their control, outside of their surveillance, where we can still enjoy a good quality of life, and we can trade amongst ourselves, and we can grow our own food, and they can do that shit over there. Somebody, yeah.
What's a good VPN?
A good VPN?
Yeah.
I use ExpressVPN. You can pay with cryptocurrency. There's other ones that are even more private and like don't even ask for an email address and stuff. But a VPN is another great tool. So if you're not familiar with a VPN, it obscures your IP address. You connect to websites through someone else's IP address, which is great. It's also great if you're like trying to buy cryptocurrency and you're like, I'm in New York and I can't do business with this exchange. It's like, well, you can log in as though you're in Honduras or something. Should be just fine. Okay, so again, it's like an inside-outside thing. Like, yeah, sure, use the Google if it's convenient or whatever, but also go ahead and set yourself up with the Signal app and find people to communicate there. And there's a bunch of like-minded people communicating through Telegram, which I think is a great tool as well. Okay. Yes. Yes, sorry.
What do you think of the notion that cryptocurrency was invented by the powers that be in order to facilitate central bank digital currencies coming about, and we're just kind of building our own prison at this point?
Sure. I appreciate that. So he's asking, like, is it possible that cryptocurrency was created as like a double agent kind of deal to come in and ultimately lead to central bank digital currencies, right? So you have central banks, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Bank of England, they create and regulate the money supply for nations. Terrible way of doing business. It's why we have crazy inflation right now. It's why they can create new money and finance foreign wars of aggression that perhaps the taxpayers would have revolted if they actually had to take it all out of their paycheck, right? Although they do that too. And so now central banks, like the bank in Chinese central bank and the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve Bank in the US, they're now talking about these central bank digital currencies. The implication of this is the way that things are done now is new money is created by the central bank just out of thin air. It's total. And really when they create new money, like they just pumped out trillions of dollars as part of the stimulus, and everyone was paying attention to the stimulus packages, which were like 2 trillion or something, I don't know. But in reality, there were trillions and trillions, even more, that went directly to commercial banks and mega corporations. That's what people don't pay attention to. It's even more money. Every time that new money comes out, the value of our money, if you have savings or whatever, or your grocery bill, that new money, the value is extracted from all of us. It's a hidden tax called the inflation tax, right? And so what happens now is new money is created, then it goes to commercial banks. Then the commercial banks can actually lend out 10 times the money that they got from the central banks. That's how inflation just goes crazy. And if you go and you put $10,000 on deposit in a bank, they can now loan out $100,000. That's why it's absolutely nuts. And if you look at the money supply in the US, it's like, oh my God, everything's expensive now, it sucks. But it's not as expensive. We trade amongst ourselves and barter with ourselves, right? So the way that, and then the commercial banks then give people the money through their loans and all sorts of stuff and credit cards. And so the way that they want to do it is the central bank issues a digital currency. Most of the money today is digital anyway, right? Even the cash that we have, it's all backed up by ones and zeros. But they want to have a direct line to the people, right? And one of the things that they're touting is they'll be able to directly tax people on their income because they'll know all the money that's moving between every single person. They'll be able to go ahead and withhold taxes from your account, or they'll be able to control what you use your money on. So we fast forward to the social credit score system, and it's like, we saw that you went to that hippie festival in the woods with a bunch of people talking about subversive ideas. That's a no-no. We're dropping your credit score down. Or you went over your carbon allotment for the season. We're dropping your credit score down. Or you went to purchase ammunition, or you went to purchase, like I sell kratom and CBD. I can't do credit card transactions with my business. I have to do e-check and cryptocurrency. So it's like you can't do any vending whatsoever to buy these alternatives to the pharmaceuticals, right? So that's the concern about central bank digital currencies. Now, the question was, what if cryptocurrency was created by the man as his ultimate ploy? So my research leads me to believe that Bitcoin was invented by this pseudonym, Satoshi Nakamoto. It'd be a man, woman, who knows who it is, a group of people. And I believe that it was invented by a group of cypherpunks. So there's this movement in the 80s and 90s as the internet was coming about. And they wanted to create a sovereign money that was outside of the scope of the government. And they experimented with all sorts of different things. One of them was called hash cash. Another guy came along with something called e-gold. There was another, I forget the name. And they were all trying to figure out how to have money for the internet. But they found that there were a couple problems. One of them was the centralization. So this e-gold thing, people were using it for like money laundering and illegal goods. And so the federal government indicted the guy behind the e-gold company. Another problem that they found with digital currencies was what's called double spending. So when you have a digital currency, what's to stop someone from just making a copy of it, right? Like a text file on your computer, you just right click and duplicate, right? So it's difficult to make sure that that money doesn't get spent twice. All right, I have this money, somebody paid me, I'm gonna copy it, and I'm gonna spend it here and spend it here. It's called double spending. Well, Bitcoin solved this problem through their decentralized blockchain that's distributed. But I think that there's this lineage of invention and failure and communication and mailing lists, and they got so close to actually creating it. You could tell they had the pieces, like the proof of work and using a hash function. I strongly believe that it was these like super internet nerd freedom guys that invented it, right? Now the NSA had a white paper in 1992 or something that called for stuff similar to Bitcoin, but it was missing many of the key elements, right? So it's possible that it's a whole plot ploy. However, I think it's very unlikely. And I genuinely believe a lot of the central bank digital currency stuff isn't even necessarily going to be like a blockchain per se. It's going to be a ledger, but it's not going to be decentralized like cryptocurrency is. And the nature of cryptocurrency, that it's completely decentralized and censor proof, and there's no one that can get in the way of me doing a transaction. They could pass a law saying that you can't do it, but we could still choose to disobey the law. And then you have privacy coins like Monero and Pirate Chain that make it very hard, that make it impossible to track who sent what to whom. So while this technology is being leveraged by many of these same players, I pointed out the World Economic Forum, they want everyone to have a digital identity that's on the blockchain. And in fact, in Austin, Texas, there's a program in the Austin Technology Department that's funded by tax-exempt foundations. They, in large part, create a lot of societal change, the Rockefeller Foundation especially. They're the ones that brought us monocropping, the Rockefeller Foundation. They're the ones that pushed the Flexner Report, which in like the 20s or 30s completely marginalized Eastern medicine and natural healing modalities and brought in the advent of Western medicine. It used to be hospitals had a huge Eastern wing, and then they had the emergency Western allopathic wing. But then the Rockefeller Foundation funded the Flexner Report that got brought to Congress, making it seem like that's all wacky, kooky stuff. That's why, and it was the Rockefellers that were behind the oil industry, and the pharmaceuticals are made from petrochemicals. It all, you know, I hate to say it, but a lot of history is a total conspiracy by evil people wanting more money and wanting to control people. But the nature of cryptocurrencies, the decentralized nature, I think that it's completely subversive to their plan. However, early on in crypto, I was like, we're going to end the central banks with cryptocurrency. This is great. I didn't anticipate how cunning they were. They're like, this is some good technology. We're going to use that shit too to track and trace, right? But the beauty is if we can come at it from a place of empowerment instead of victimhood, then we can consciously be the architects of our own future and leverage these amazing systems to create our own economies and our own networks and our own trade and all that stuff. They can do that over there, and most people are going to go along with it, but we're going to do this over here, and hopefully this is more attractive. And a lot of people will be like, hey, wait a second. I want to keep more of my money. I want to be happy and glowing and dancing near the river, you know? Okay, so, all right. So that's big tech. All right, let's go on to the next topic. Great question, by the way. Okay, food is the next thing, right? Raise your hand if a majority of your food comes from a grocery store. Okay. Raise your hand if a majority of your food comes from a local farm or your own farm. Very nice. Very nice. So it's great to get your food locally grown, not only because you're supporting local farmers, right? It's better for the environment. A lot of food, anybody ever seen like the food that's grown in South America and then it goes over to be packaged in China and then it comes back over to the US? It's like, wow, that sucks. It's expensive, it's vulnerable, and it's not good for the environment, right? So it's really important to get food locally if we can. It's healthier, right, to grow it on your own or to go to the local farm. And on top of that, we're really experiencing some major supply chain issues. And as I started off earlier, what I want to do is exit coercive and centralized systems, because as systems are more and more centralized, they become more vulnerable, and it makes it easier for them to collapse and fail. And the food supply system is exactly this case right here. So what can we do in order to decentralize our food production? Does anybody have any ideas or anything that they do in their lives? CSAs, yep, support a local farmer. Rebecca, do you want to share about the agri-hood that you live in?
Sure. I am the sales manager at a tiny home community, but I also lived there full time for 2 years. We're building a neighborhood around agriculture. So there's 2 acres for food production right now. Eventually there will be 4. We grow certified organic farm produce. It's called Green Gate Farm. The community is called Village Farm Tiny Home Community. So the site plan will have 170 lot locations. It will be one of the largest tiny home communities in the world. And most people move in so that they can volunteer on the farm, live near the regenerative agriculture. There's raised beds all the way throughout the property. So there's all sorts of food production that's really the heart of the community. So instead of like a golf course or a tennis court as the amenity, it's the farm. It's called an agri-hood, neighborhood around agriculture. It's actually just 30 minutes away on Decker Lake. East Austin.
Yeah, and they have a CSA that the farmers do. So there's tons of local farms all over the place, and it's easy to get tapped into them. Although there's such a high demand, sometimes they have a waiting list to do their CSA. So another thing, like I heard like Johnson's backyard garden had some issues.
Yeah,
with
there's some
falling out.
drama there.
But
It's a little bleach farm.
and we don't want to spread any drama. But a lot of these farms have a volunteer program where you can go put some sweat equity in the farm, and they'll send you with a CSA box, which is really cool, affordable too. Farmers markets. Are there any farmers markets anyone frequents? Anybody? Yes. What do you got? Share with us.
This?
No. Share. What farmers markets do you go to?
My local farmer's market. I live in Brownsville.
Oh, right on. Cool.
Yeah, I know all the farmers in the area.
Yeah.
I want to know where my food comes from. I want to know it's coming straight from Mother
That's
Earth
right.
and not from a grocery store.
Yep. To have a connection for sure. And then one of the best things you can do is just grow food on your property or in your backyard. Does anybody have a garden on their home? Sweet. Excellent. Got to start somewhere.
I
Yeah.
don't have a garden, but just in the name of like starting somewhere, I've killed many plants. In fact, like you could probably call it a genocide. But I grow my own microgreens. That feels like a really good place to start for me. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's super easy. You get a super quick turnaround.
Yeah.
I mean, it can boost your like nutritional input. It's not gonna you're not gonna live on microgreens, of course, but it's just like a good starter point. I feel like if I can do, anybody.
Yeah. That's a great point. And it's easy to do, and it pops up quick. Super healthy too.
There's a farmer's market in Denton as well, and it's run by one of my dear friends, and it's called, his farm specifically is called Misty Moon Farms, and he does permaculture. I mean, he's like into like the latest technology with permaculture and agriculture and doing amazing things out there. So,
I love it.
yeah.
Sweet. And I like that nexus of like the old traditional way plus technology, right? Technology can be a very beautiful, beneficial thing if we use it in the right way.
Misty Moons is so cool. Like you walk through he's creating where you walk through the neighborhood, and instead of like a regular tree, it's like an apple tree.
Yeah.
You just grab an apple, right? Like this whole community instead of just to look.
I love that. So to Leandre's point, it's kind of hard to take something from seed to fruit, right? Tomatoes are easy. Start with something that's easy, right? Tomatoes, leafy greens tend to be easy. Okra is super damn easy to grow in Texas, right? And then people love sharing about their garden and their gardening skills. So if you're looking for help and support, find a gardener and ask if you could go help on their farm or in their garden, or if they could come over and help. I'm going to talk more about this at one of the later sections, but we started a decentralized network called the Freedom Cell Network. Where are my Freedom Cell people at? Yeah. All right. So so we have a 10-acre homestead, and I laid out this giant plot and killed a bunch of grass and didn't do anything with it. I laid out a tarp to kill the grass called desolarization. You block the sun and the grass dies. And I was like, wait a second, I think this is going to be a lot of work. Sure enough, time went by and the grass started growing back. But we had a little Freedom Cell group come out. 6 people showed up, and we were able to plant our first garden beds, right? So having a community and having people to help really helps to accelerate things. So I just learned I have 5 minutes. I thought I had 30 more minutes. So let me just hit some of these up. Hour and a half. So
Where's your 10 acres?
in Bastrop. Yeah. Just like 15 minutes south of Bastrop. So, all right, so food, super critical. Start somewhere, because a lot of people have like their survival seed bank in the closet. And they're like, if shit hits the fan, we're going to bust out the seed bank and we'll be fine. It's like, it's not that easy, especially if you have like a winter storm or something crazy, right? So start small, get help from other people, and then link up with farmers in your area. We do this meat share program in the Freedom Cell Network where we all chip in and go in on a cow that gets butchered. There's probably some vegans in the audience, but same thing, you can go in on CSA box or whatever. The point is to work with other human beings to make this stuff happen, and it makes it a lot easier.
Are you guys getting the calf, or are you buying the cow for your slaughter?
We're buying the cow from the farm. Yeah, grass-fed and everything. I want to do pigs and stuff on the property, and my son loves to garden and loves animals. But the challenge is, he's like, we're not killing the pig, Dad. You know, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't have a pig, and my son falls in love with it, and then we're gonna slaughter it. So I don't know what to do about that. Although we'll slaughter a chicken. Anyway, Okay, so that's food, super important. Diet too. Like if we're gonna live our best lives and show up in the world, it's really important what we eat. You literally are what you eat. So try to be in alignment with what it is for your health goals and your lifestyle goals, especially if you want to live a long, healthy life and see your grandchildren grow up and all sorts of stuff. There's just so much chemicals and toxins and all sorts of nasty stuff out there, which again, eating from local farms and local organic food, it's so beneficial for multiple different reasons. It's just all synergistic. Watch out for sugar too. Sugar's bad news bears. It's like a drug, man. It's
Worse than crack.
yeah, it's hardcore. Okay, all right. So this kind of ties into health, right? So, you know, there's some places for pharmaceuticals, and this is all on a personal level, right? But I do think with the right diet, with the right natural practitioner, with the right plant-based medicine, with the right activity and exercise in your life, people can live a life completely free of pharmaceuticals. My company, I sell kratom and CBD and cannabis products, and these plant medicines have helped many people transition away from pharmaceuticals entirely. Kratom especially, it helps folks that are dependent on opioids and opiates. When I say opiates, I mean heroin. Opioids meaning pain medicine, right? And a lot of people, they take it, they find themselves dependent or addicted to it. They try to quit. They have terrible withdrawal symptoms. Well, this plant kratom helps them to minimize the withdrawal symptoms so that they can transition to sobriety. My lovely fiance was addicted to Adderall for like 10, 12 years. And if you look at the chemical name of Adderall, it's literally methamphetamine. It's like legal meth. It's just a couple molecules away. And she would take the Adderall, and then she would drink alcohol to slow down at night. She called it pumping the brakes. And this created this vicious cycle. And when we started dating, I was like, whoa, she's not good at drinking. Some people can drink, you know, she wasn't good at drinking and it wasn't serving her, right? So I encouraged her to try kratom, and sure enough, she was able to quit the Adderall altogether, and she hasn't drank in 2 years, which I think is super cool. No wonder the federal government doesn't like kratom and plant medicines, right? Because it's taken from the pharmaceuticals. But if folks are using pharmaceuticals and they feel like they're not serving them, or there's a lot of folks my age that are still taking this attention medicine and Adderall and stuff, I would encourage you to take stock of that, come up with a strategy, you know, use your own judgment when you consult with your physician, because oftentimes they want to keep you, right? The money's not in the cure, the money's in the comeback, as they say. But consider visiting a naturopath, a chiropractor, or experimenting with some Eastern healing modalities and transition away. And oftentimes there's community, there's support, and there's people that can help. Just with the attention thing, you know, one thing that's a big difference, that's why they give it to kids in school, because there's some kids that are just kind of like brilliant, or their brain fires in different ways, and they're not made for that environment to be sitting in a chair for, what, 8 hours a day with little breaks here and there. So one thing that you can do is like shift your lifestyle so it's in alignment with your personality and with the way that your brain functions, right? So I would encourage folks, when there's illness, when there's sickness, to try to see if you can heal first through natural modalities, because oftentimes people get hooked, and then the pharmaceuticals, there's other pharmaceuticals to deal with that, this, that, and the other. So just want to throw that out there. Okay, so the next area, all right, well, we'll just finish here, because I don't know if there's another talk coming up. The way that we live, or where we live. We're doing a summit called the Exit and Build Land Summit on November 6th and 7th. And we want to educate people and empower people so they can exit the big cities. Because I don't know about you guys, the cities in Austin was no longer in alignment with how I want to live my life. The traffic, the chaos, the rush, the hurry, just so many damn people. Like, I want to spend my time around people that are in alignment with my values. So we're encouraging people, and we're educating and inspiring people to move out of the city, to buy land cooperatively, or buy your own land and then link up and build intentional community. Because ultimately, it's like a lot of the anguish and stress and anxiety we experience in our life, I think, is as a symptom of how we live our lives. And to be able to live our life like this all the time sure would lead to, I think, a better quality of life and a better standard of living. And it would create an environment that makes all of the previous things easier to do, right? Like, we don't have to go to that corporate job if most of our food comes from the land, right? or if we all chip in to pay for the mortgage or to pay for a rent, bringing down the cost of that. We're not going to be unhealthy if we're constantly working in the farm, out in the sun, eating good food, right? We're not even going to need to use our computer so much if our community is there, and that's where most of our life takes place. And then the final thing, I invite everyone to join the Freedom Cell Network if you haven't already. It's over 26,000 like-minded people all across the globe. And our goal is it's people that are aware of the problem, like I started off discussing the problem, but more importantly, it's people that are focused on solutions to that problem. They're not focused in that reactionary paradigm. They're out there ready and willing to exit the matrix and build better systems. I hope that you'll join us in doing all that. All right. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to hear more, we can do a part 2 at 6 o'clock. If you're too interested, you can have the space 6 to 7 tonight. And then tomorrow, you've been invited to speak on the main stage at 11.
Oh, cool.
So if y'all want to hear more.
Thank you.
Cool.
A new update instead of an hour and a half now, so someone else is doing work.
Excellent. And we have a booth over there with the blue top if anybody wants to come hang out or try some Delta 8 gummies or some Kratom or hang out and talk about some of the stuff that we shared. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody online. Peace.